Times. For me, it was emotional and I was a bit somber. Yeah. Even now I'm getting a bit emotional. So, yeah, it was part of the history. I'm part of the history, so it's nice to be there.
Barrow Party, slow, march.
The Queen's Company 1st Battalion Grenadier Guards carried the Queen from the gun carriage to Westminster Hall, their Commander-in-Chief, also a military wife, mother and grandmother, and the first female royal to join the armed services. Here, Princess Catherine and the Duchess of Sussex joined their husbands. The Archbishop of Canterbury read the opening prayer.
O God, the Maker and Redeemer of all mankind, grant us, with thy servant Queen Elizabeth.
King Charles faced the coffin in this last moment with his mother until the funeral on Monday. A double tap from the officer of the watch signalled the start of the first vigil, kept by 4 officers from the Household Cavalry. While outside, the queue began to stretch down the Thames, across it and back on itself. The public in waiting. And they will wait, and wait, for hours on end, for this last chance to spend just a moment with their Queen and say goodbye, each in their own way. Jason Farrell, Sky News.
And if you scan the QR code on your screen right now, you can watch the Queen's lying in state in full on the Sky News website and mobile apps. Now, to help you plan, the Department for Digital, Culture, Media and Sport have released a live stream showing the length of the queue. As you can see, it's currently 2.4 miles long. That's around 4 kilometres. Well, King Charles has now left London following today's procession. Earlier this afternoon, he was filmed returning to Highgrove, his home in Gloucestershire. It's not yet clear how long he will remain there before returning to the capital. Our royal correspondent, Laura Bundock, is with me, as is Patrick Harrison, the King's former press secretary. One of the surprises of the last couple of days has, I guess, been the wash of emotion that seems to have crossed the nation about the Queen herself. But the second big surprise, I think, has been perhaps the warmth towards the new king, as far as we can make out. Has that surprised you, Laura?
Well, we meet the crowds. So in Northern Ireland yesterday, for example, it was an effort to get there. There was a ring of steel around Hillsborough Castle. People had to park their car up miles away. They had to be driven in buses, airport-style sort of security to get there. But everyone I spoke to said, nothing. Of course we want to come here. We want to come here. We want to say farewell to the Queen, say thank you and pay our condolences to the King, but we want to welcome him as well. And there was a palpable energy, I think, in the crowd as well. I think it's been noticed here as well, that on the one hand, you have the grieving of a monarch, but on the other hand, you have the welcoming of a new one. And so there's this dual thing going on here where the crowds, it's a sombre, it is a sombre moment in the crowd, but at the same time, I think certainly for people coming to London, or we've seen in Edinburgh and in Northern Ireland so far, a sense that they want to show their support. And we've seen that with his family as well, with all the messages of support they've been...
Indeed. In fact, Patrick, I noticed the phrase, God save the King, actually emerged for the first time. I heard it for the first time when you were in Northern Ireland. And I see it's been picked up here. I don't think people would quite have imagined that this was the reception that Charles was going to get if you go back 10 or 15 years. Has that struck you?
Well, what struck me is that people are responding to this event in multiple ways. And I think that we all see that this is a family grieving. And just as we are in some way mourning the Queen, different levels, so we also recognise that this is a family who are saying goodbye to a much-loved member of their family, the head of their family. But I think there's also some reflection that we've witnessed in the extraordinary work that the royal family do. The Queen Queen and her commitment of duty, but also all the other members of the royal family. Princess Royal, for example, the hardest working member of the royal family, each year does more engagements than everybody else. And I think people are reflecting on the fact that the King has already spent 50 years of his life in public service. So I think it's on multiple levels that people are showing their support for the royal family and for the institution of monarchy.
Well, one of the interesting things is that we can see that now because, of course, we've got wall-to-wall coverage of what's going on in the streets and so on. Would it be fair to say that the planning now for these days has, for the first time, I think, in these kind of state occasions, really anticipated, if you like, the emergence of natural rituals, the flowers, the quiet applause, which I think came as a surprise to people. And actually, if you're thinking about natural rituals, there's now the queue. I mean, that is the most British ritual you could imagine.
We love a queue.
We love a queue. And if you had to have a symbol for Britishness, that's it. But has the planning sort of taken into account this sort of changed sentiment, the desire of the public to be part of it rather than behind the gates?
Absolutely, it has. I was involved with the London Bridge, as we called it, the planning for all these 10 days up to the funeral, from the year 2000 to the year 2014. Well, a lot changed in that time. Obviously, we had the advent of smart technology. So as we were looking at these plans, we realised that people would be able to follow information on their tablets, on their phones. And we also looked at how we could engage the public in new ways. So making sure we were matching the ceremonial and the traditional with perhaps more modern expectations of the public's involvement. One example might be the Accession Councils. We had a debate about whether or not we should televise the Accession Council. It wasn't televised back in 1952. I believe very strongly that it should be televised this time round, and I was thrilled that it was, because I think in this day and age you need to show and explain the ritual and understand what's going on. And we saw there the crown as the sort of binding glue, if you like, of the constitutional monarchy, and you saw all those other politicians from opposing sides, and you saw members of the clergy and all others there, and the crown as that unifying force over the top, if you like, there in the Accession Council. I thought it was very powerful to be able to see that.
Just a matter of interest, I don't want you to give away any state secrets. When was the decision made that the Accession Council should be televised?
That would have been made right now, because just in the last week or so, because these plans are always for the ultimate sanction at the time. So you create all these plans, they're there ready to go, but of course, you also have to make the final decision as you move through.
I think what's interesting, though, is while you have the traditional, the ceremonial, even televised, it felt a little inaccessible. Could we name all the people, all the roles, all the titles, even the trumpeters? But at the same time...
The golden stick in waiting.
But that's why I think we saw, on that very same day, incredible walkabouts as well. Yes. Because I think as King, Charles knows we've got that side of the job, and it's grand, the uniforms, all of that. And people who like it and will engage with it will always engage in it. But at the same time, he wants to see people, he wants to meet people, which is why we've had this really quick whiz round the nation. So it's going to end in Wales on Friday this week. That's why I think it's a 24-hour operation to get as many people as possible through Westminster Hall at the moment, because he knows how much this moment means to people. And as a new monarch, he wants to make sure that he brings the people with him on this journey, and he needs their support along the way.
And that was his style also when he was Prince of Wales. I remember when working with him, he hated driving past crowds, and we'd quite often get the call, we're going to stop short, as it was called, which is stopping the car short of the destination so that he get out and meet members of the crowd.
You can just decide on the moment, I'm going to stop it.
We'd like to stop, need to meet the crowd because they've come out. You don't always know whether you're going to get a crowd or not, but if there is a crowd there, he always felt that if he could, if there was time, then he'd like to meet them. Sometimes you'd have a ceremonial reason why you had to carry on, and because it was starting time of a church service or something like that. But if he could meet the crowd, then he would.
I can imagine what would be going through the protection officer's mind. Well, let's return to the security point in a moment. Now, as you watch the pictures of the public walking past the Queen's coffin, which we'll see in a moment, you would be hard-pressed to find a better cross-section of British society. People of every age, every background represented, each with their own reason for putting aside hours of their own time to come to Westminster, but with the same person as their inspiration. Sky's Nick Martin has been talking to some of those queuing for the Queen.
In the long queues, they watch the television coverage of this historic event. They're all part of history now. And at the very front of this line are three ladies who forged a friendship. Vanessa, Annie and Grace spent 4 days sleeping here, and they'll be the first to see the Queen lie in state.
I don't know what I'm going to be expecting in there when you walk in. We'll be just saying prayers in my heart for her peaceful rest, and thank Mount for the great service that she's done for 70 years in rain, non-stop. If I didn't get the chance to be in the first, I would have still come to queue up anyway.
Well, I just think it's we like the ceremonial aspect of it, the guards, gleaming buttons, the polish, you know, the regimentation when the guards come by. I've just been enthralled by it and thrilled by it since I was 4.
If I were to be at the back, maybe I'll feel tired to go home. But because I'm just here in the front of the queue, I feel so. It gives me the courage, the determination.
It is a huge effort, directing so many people into one place. 8-year-old Louis Jenkinson from Oxford told me he's a big fan of the Queen.
She's a very funny woman. I like the Paddington Bear bit.
Yeah, that was cool, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was really funny.
Yeah. Well, thanks for talking to me, Louis.
Well, this is the longest conversation I've had with a reporter.
Is it? Yeah, I do go on a bit.
And this is what they were waiting for. To see with their own eyes, to be in the same room, to have their moment with their Queen.
You're waiting, you're queuing up for this moment, but the moment you see the coffin, it hits you, and I don't think you're ever really ready for that.
We all came out, my daughter, my granddaughter and I came out, quite emotional, really.
To give her our respect for everything that she's done, 70 years of service. You won't find a better Queen, will you?
There are now thousands of people queuing to see the Queen lie in state, and this line goes on for miles. Young, old, some from nearby, others have travelled from far afield, but they are all part of a remarkable people's pilgrimage. They are unforgettable images of a nation mourning. Nick Martin, Sky News, Westminster.
Well, there are lots of people still on that pilgrimage. Sky's Ashna Hurinag is at Westminster Bridge with the people, trying to catch up with those who've already been to pay their respects to the Queen.
Well, people are still filtering through after having been inside Westminster Hall. They're coming up this route here, and there are people who have just been inside that building there, where they have been inside to see and walk around Her Majesty's coffin, and 2 people who have done just that, who I'd like to introduce you to, are Maurice and Gina, who are over here. These are some thousands of people now we are talking about who've queued up for hours. Maurice and Gina, thank you so much for chatting to us. Tell us what it was like being inside there.
Amazing, really amazing. I mean, we queued and we just thought it was the best day to come and pay our respects. And yeah, we're glad we did.
Can you talk to us about what it felt like to be inside there? Because everyone we've spoken to says it's so still, it's so sombre and quiet. How did you feel?
Sombre. I wouldn't say sombre. Yes, it was quiet, but I suppose it just goes with the with everything that's happening and the loss. She was a great loss.
Yeah. You travelled here from Leicestershire. Why did you want to make this journey today?
Pay our respects, I think, to show our appreciation. Yeah.
And what did you say? What did you think about in your head? I know you couldn't speak out loud, but were you thinking about anything in particular?
We prayed for her. Yeah.
Why is that?
Well, she was very strong with her faith. and we did. Yeah.
Feel, pleased that you've done it, relieved you've done it, or at peace, I suppose?
Yeah, very happy that we did make this journey.
She dragged me.
But worth it?
It was worth
Very
it.
worth it.
And how long were you queuing for, finally?
I think since 2:30.
2:30.
Not bad at all. It is showing that the line is moving fairly quickly.
They were very organised.
Thank you both so much, and then get back to Leicestershire. All right,
Thank
that's
you.
okay. So many people are making that journey, and they are trickling through, Trevor. Every so often you'll get a wave of people, and they have all come from seeing Her Majesty inside, walked around that coffin and paid their own respects. This line will continue to move now over the next 4 days. This will be going throughout the night, and people, I guess, feeling that sense of grief. Those particular ladies said that they felt happy and pleased that they were finally able to be there. Interestingly, she's saying that she didn't feel like it was a sombre mood. But many people here we have seen crying, tears down their faces. It really is a sense of mixed emotions, but definitely a different sense and feeling here in the capital today compared to the past few days where people have been queuing up, and perhaps there was a more celebratory atmosphere. Today it feels a little bit more still.
Thank you, Ashna. And I think that point about the mixture of moods is really important. We'll return to that with Laura and Patrick in a moment. But people from all over the country and further afield are expected to come to London in the next few days. Each will have their own personal reasons why the Queen was so important to them. Tom Parmenter has been to Cheshire and North Wales to meet some of those preparing to make the trip down to London, set on paying their respects.
From all corners of this kingdom, they are coming, with purpose and provisions.
Chicken sandwiches, we have cheese and onion crisp, Belgian chocolate cookies for a little munch in the queue.
From Dominique's kitchen in Widnes to Paula's back garden in Prestatyn.
Yeah, so we had lots of bunting everywhere. We had balloons.
It was only June when the Platinum Jubilee party here was in full swing.
The Queen made her appearance. She was just here in full vision, and she had 2 little corgis with her.
Now Paula and her daughter just want to go to London and say thank you.
She wasn't with me at the time when I was in the Mall in 2002. She was actually inside my tummy, not knowing I was having a boy or a girl at the time. So to take her with me 20 years later for a different occasion, for a more sombre occasion, but for a royal occasion.
It's your family and it's their family.
Yeah.
They'll be up early. The coach pickups along this stretch of the North Wales coastline start at 2:15 a.m. But Geraint is all set.
It is the headline of this century, I would have thought. It's, you know, you're not involved in this every day, and some way, shape or form, everybody is involved.
On Teesside, Ben has just sorted his train. It's a trip he's making on behalf of his mum.
My mother was a massive supporter of the Queen. She's no longer with us, and I feel that it's an opportunity to make her part of this moment as well. You could say that part of the glue of society has come a little bit unstuck, and it's brought the country together to reassess where we go from here.
Back in Widnes, there's another train to catch.
I think it's truly what makes us British, our monarchy.
Yeah. You seem quite G'd up by it today.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. Yeah. I mean, I would have got it any way I could have.
All this has actually moved people, and for however long it lasts, right now, this country feels like a more united kingdom, and that is quite a legacy.
I am so glad we're here. So we found the end.
They see it as their duty to take a place in their nation's story. Tom Parmenter, Sky News.
Laura and Patrick are still with me. Patrick, we're hearing a lot about the sort of stoicism of people in the queue, but one thing that's emerging rather clearly is a very unusual mix of, if you like, sadness and celebration, which normally don't sit together very well, but seem to be going in parallel, I think, as Laura was saying earlier on this occasion.
It is.
What's that about?
It's the unique nature of this event, isn't it? And it starts at the very moment that, of course, the Queen sadly passes away, and long live the King. Suddenly you have a new king. So right from the start, you have a period of mourning, a much-loved monarch who has been our guiding light for generations, and you also get this new era, the start of a new reign. And so right from from the very start, and I think that what's been interesting is that those two parallel emotions have carried on throughout the days. What are we now? So 7 days in, and through all the ceremony and the pageantry on one side and the personal acts of remembrance that we've seen, both from members of the royal family, but also from the public, those two parallel emotions are still running in parallel tonight.
It's an unusual thing. I mean, we wouldn't have expected to see these two things running together, given the somberness of of what has happened. But there's still a sort of rather, I won't say upbeat, but very positive mood.
Oh, I think you can say upbeat, actually. I do feel in the crowds the inevitable sorrow that people who are coming here may feel is absolutely running in tandem with an expectation, and a positive one, certainly from people who are coming to the palaces to meet the new king, that this is a continuum. He's not shape-shifting from Prince of Wales to king. It just happens straight away. So this is his role, and they're expecting him to fulfil it. And it was interesting in Northern Ireland yesterday, speaking to certainly older people who'd gathered there, saying, well, look, he's had the absolute best tutor you could possibly expect. So we've loved seeing the Queen as head of state. We now know it is her son, the King, who takes over. And, he's had a long time training for this, but the absolute best teacher possible. So there is a hope certainly there that he will carry on. And let's remember, the Northern Ireland visit was the most sensitive one of all the tours of the nation. So it was a tricky day, publicly and politically, with the meetings that were going on. And it's interesting, even at Highgrove this evening, we're hearing of all the calls. So after this enormous procession, this big moment of leading the national grief, leading his family's grief, then having to have calls with Governor-Generals from Australia, heads of state, really big calls taking place, whilst trying to have a bit of downtime at Highgrove, where it is his home, where it is a private place. And perhaps he is trying to also take this private moment for grief as well.
But I think there's also a bit of national pride here as well. I think we're proud of our institution. We're proud of the ceremonies that we put on. The procession today is something that people are very proud of that we do. I think we'll be very, very proud as a nation that the eyes of the world will be on us on Monday when that funeral takes place. And I think we are also very proud of the fact that we have a king who cares passionately about some of the subjects that affect our lives, such as the environment. A king who in 1976, with his naval pension, set up the Prince's Trust, which has helped over 1 million young people.
Yes. In fact, somebody said to me earlier on today, in the very British way that we do this better than anybody else. And I have to confess, I watched for the whole of the 38 minutes that it took them to come from here to Westminster Hall to see if anybody missed a step. And what was striking, not a single person missed a step. That's the pageantry and that's the organised thing. But I'm very interested in, I said earlier on that these natural rituals seem to be evolving. We get the flowers now at these kinds of events. And we've seen this, as I say, these ripples of applause as the king and his siblings pass, which seems to me to be a new thing. And I heard one of our colleagues talking to people in the queue today about what you should do when you come to the catafalque. Should you bow? Should you curtsy? And so on. And it's really, again, watching it, everybody seems to have just, without being told what to do, to have found a natural way of doing things gracefully.
I think it's you look at the people who are filing past now live in Westminster Hall, you can see there'll be a little Mexican wave of nodding, I think. Maybe that's a group who were with each other in the queue. Other people will just stand and pause. But given the amount of time they've been queuing, you get this very brief moment in this enormous room. I mean, the size of it is quite something. Coming down those steps, it sort of hits you, really. This sort of blaze of red in the middle, surrounded by the grey stone. And it is interesting, I think, that they've queued with something they wanted to do. But the moment, you can see it sort of... There's a gentleman there, but you can see it almost on the face, the awe, and kind of, here I am, this is it.
Yeah.
And then the pause, and then that very calm, peaceful, private moment. Yeah. Very brief, but very personal.
And the silence at various moments has been striking, but also very expressive.
Absolutely, and I think, you know, with all the meticulous planning that underpins this, there's also here we're seeing the freedom to allow people to express their respects in whichever way they feel most comfortable, whether it's a nod of the head or just a slow pause in front, or we saw earlier a couple of gentlemen take their hats off. We've seen different forms of expression that people want to do. That
baby is going to hear the story of being there for the rest of his life. Isn't that the sweetest thing?
Maybe she's carried him, because you can't take any pushchairs in there. And, gosh, that baby's
she's been carrying him for hours, I would think. Amazing. The King tonight, Patrick, will, as Laura's been saying, be on to some very important people.
Yes, he's made a lot of phone calls, we understand, today to various heads of state, including President Biden and High Commissioners of the realms. Of course, many of these people he will know. This is a man who has himself been in public life for over 50 years and will know many of these people, if not all of them, personally, and he'll have visited many, if not all of their countries. But also in Highgrove tonight, which is his own home, he'll also have a time to reflect. He's now been in the public eye for 7 days at a time of his own personal grieving. And so I hope at least he'll have a little bit of time tonight just to pause and reflect as well.
OK, well, who knows? He might be watching the telly. Now, if you scan the QR code on your screen right now, you can listen to the latest episode of the Sky News Daily Podcast with Leo Boletto, which takes a look at today's events in full, including a conversation with the Archbishop of Canterbury, Justin Welby. You can subscribe to the Daily for free wherever you get your podcasts. After the procession from Buckingham Palace to Westminster Hall earlier today, let's look at what's in store over the coming days. The Queen's lying in state began just over 4 hours ago. She'll remain there until the morning of the funeral on Monday. On Friday, the King and Queen consort will travel to Cardiff, where they'll attend a prayer service and meet the Welsh First Minister. On Sunday evening, the night before the funeral, King Charles will host a reception for foreign dignitaries who will attend. A minute of silence will also be held across the UK at 8 p.m. to honour the Queen. Then, on the morning of the 19th of September, the lying in state ends and the Queen's coffin will be taken in procession to Westminster Abbey for her state funeral. Well, there's nothing that British people love more than a queue. But one might have thought that the winding mass of people waiting to pay their respects to the Queen might be enough to give even the most determined visitor pause for thought. No, not so, it seems. Sky's Becky Johnson has spent the day with people waiting patiently at the back of the queue.
Are you looking for the back of the queue? Yes. Yes, just here.
Is this the end of the queue?
This is the end of the queue, that's the good news.
In true British tradition, people came prepared to queue. Even knowing they'd be here for hours didn't stop people joining in their thousands. The end of the queue, moving back and back. By 11 a.m, it had reached the London Eye. Joining the line was Bryony with her 3-month-old.
Doing it.
Little Indiana, blissfully unaware of the wait that lay ahead.
back at the queue. Well, I haven't told any of family or friends because they all think I'm insane bringing my child, but I figured it's a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity and we'll never have another Queen again.
While we've been talking, you're not the back of the queue anymore.
That's very exciting. She's an incredible woman. She'll be, odd. I'm not even from here, but I just feel like she's had a profound impact on all of us, and it's part of history.
What do you think it will take from here?
I can't decide how long.
By lunchtime, Kofi was keeping count.
How many have we got so far?
767.
A sign was found for him to wear to signal the back of the queue.
People want to come and see the Queen to show their last respect to the Queen. That's why they are coming up with their numbers.
At 2 p.m, the latest to join were at the Oxo Tower.
This is the end, yes. You've got there.
4-year-old Effie settling in for a long wait with her mum.
Effie is Queen and Princess mad. She loves all the Queen's outfits and how colourful her hats are. And she's been asking a lot to come and help bury the Queen. She's wore her crown all day in school. She hasn't took it off because she's respecting the Queen and her individuality.
In the afternoon sunshine, they kept coming. As people wait, the back of the queue never stands still. Every second brings new arrivals. By 5 p.m, the queue stretched almost back to HMS Belfast. But as the first mourners went in to see the Queen, the line moved forwards, bringing those towards the back a little closer.
For the sacrifice and all the work she did, even the day before she left us, she ushered in a new Prime Minister. That dedication, it's priceless. So a few minutes, a few hours, it's worth it.
So many are prepared to wait. Over the coming days, many thousands more will join the back of the queue. Becky Johnson, Sky News, Central London.
President Biden spoke to King Charles today to offer his condolences on the death of the Queen and expressed his wish to continue a close relationship with the King. It was another day of busy diplomacy for the monarch, who also spoke to the presidents of Ireland and France. Let's talk about that and some of the wider issues now in the build-up to the funeral on Monday with Lord Darragh, the former UK ambassador to the United States. He was also the UK's national security advisor. Lord Darragh, of course, we have to remember that President Biden, as well as being the leader of the chief executive of the United States, is also their head of state. So presumably this conversation was head of state to head of state.
It was. As you say, he's both head of the administration and head of state, unlike King Charles, who is just a constitutional monarch. So he has a slightly wider remit than King Charles does.
So what would that conversation have been about? I mean, what do sovereigns and head of states talk to each other about?
They know each other already, Trevor. I mean, the most recent time they met, I think, was at that big climate change conference a year or so ago in Glasgow. And I think they're both quite strong on green issues. So the any policy would have been on the importance of the environment. But I think it was primarily the President expressing his condolences for the death of Her Majesty and saying to King Charles his best wishes for his future role and looking forward to seeing him at the state funeral on Monday.
And we understand he's also spoken to Monsieur Macron. And I wonder if there might have been a mild awkwardness about the degree of friendship between us and France right now.
I understand why you would ask. I kind of doubt it. And I have to say I thought President Macron's message after the death of the Queen was extraordinarily generous and beautifully worded. So I think actually it spoke of a genuine admiration on President Macron's part for Her Majesty, and I think that he and King Charles will get on just fine.
Laura, there's a lot of diplomacy going on, and we're going to see all of the foreign dignitaries, I think 30 heads of state or something like that, coming into town on Sunday. That is going to be a jamboree.
A big reception, yeah, and a big moment, really, because this is first time as king. Obviously, I think most of the people there, if not all of them, will have already met and will have a relationship with the king. But this is his first moment, isn't it, as monarch? And we've seen lots of these political meetings taking place from the political parties here in Westminster, then also in Scotland, in Northern Ireland as well, where the political situation, the king will know full well, is particularly fragile at the moment, and he will know and appreciate the role his mother had. And in a very important role over the years, and a role he's tried to replicate with various handshakes along the way. But certainly these diplomatic meetings are very much part of the job, aren't they? And a significant moment for him now taking on that mantle as monarch, as opposed to the Prince of Wales in the past.
Lord Darragh, you both made the point that he knows all of these people. And in fact, you saw the pictures of him with the ambassadors and high commissioners from the realms. It's clear he spent a lot of time with these people. Of course, he's now a different entity. I won't say person, he's a different entity. When he meets these heads of state over this weekend, he's going to be meeting them in a completely new guise. What signals should we look for that tell us that actually this is a new Charles? Because he said in all his speeches now, I am going to be not the person you knew before, I am going to be more like my mother in that guise. What should we look for to see the difference?
He's been preparing for this role literally for decades. As Laura says, he is much travelled and he will know many of the heads of state and heads of government who are attending. I thought that television address that he did the day after his mother's death was announced was absolutely pitch perfect, and there were some important signals there about how he was going to conduct his time as king. And I think you will see him steering clear of anything in public that is remotely controversial. I mean, he was famous for his standing up for environmental issues. I think you won't hear any of that. I think it'll be very correct, and I think he will accomplish the task admirably, because he is so well prepared for it, and from the sound of it, he knows exactly how he's going to do it.
Yes. Now, I do think that we ought not to ignore the fact that his mother would have found ways of sending signals. The famous moment where at COP26, apparently unaware that there were any microphones near her, I think that's unlikely, she said, they talk but they don't do, which was a pretty big signal.
I think he will be very cautious, at least initially. I'd be surprised if we saw any of that, Trevor. But, you know, we know him to be a man of strong views on some issues, so he'll find ways of getting them across in private, even if he is very, very cautious in public.
One of the big things, you were National Security Advisor, one of the big things that we're going to have to confront, frankly, is keeping all of these dignitaries safe, and, by the way, protecting the crowds from any potential danger. How big an operation is this going to have to be?
It may just be the biggest in history, at least in recent history. I can't imagine just how huge a task it is when you have to basically protect 70-odd dignitaries every minute they are here. And that means when they're in the hotels or in their residences, when they're on the way to the events, when they're in the service, when they're in the reception at Buckingham Palace on Sunday night, and then another reception, I think, after the funeral. So it's a huge task spreading over 2 or 3 days. So I'm not surprised that basically the entire police force in the country seems to be being pulled into it. It's massive.
Laura, we heard that there's quite a lot of special arrangements being made. The President of the United States has been allowed to bring his own car. I imagine this thing they call the Beast. But everybody else is going to be on the bus, is that right?
It's going to be a bus. We've seen busloads coming in before. In fact, we've seen busloads of royals as well. The Guildhall, the service there, or the lunch there. There was a bus bringing in you know, it was amazing actually seeing them all filing off the bus, basically, royal after royal after royal, because there is a problem. You've got a lot of people to get in there, and, you know, you can't clog up the roads with lots and lots of cars and people getting out of lots of cars. So it will be buses of dignitaries, but not President Biden, no.
I mean, it's worth adding here, Trevor, that protocol won't be perfect. It can't be perfect with this number of distinguished guests. But first and foremost, this is a commemoration of and celebration of an extraordinary woman and an extraordinary life. So you would expect heads of government and heads of state just for this couple of days to say, well, that's what I'm here for, and, you know, the protocol isn't that important when it's this sort of event.
There'll be a lot going on aside from the royal obsequies that we will see. This will be probably the biggest gathering of these kinds of people for some time. So presumably there'll be a lot of bilaterals going on. They will be meeting face-to-face to talk about... There are other things going on in the world, of course, Ukraine and so on. How much of this is an opportunity for them, some of the leaders, to meet each other?
It's unquestionably a major opportunity, as you say, one of the biggest diplomatic gatherings in recent history. And people will not want to say in public, this has been an opportunity for me to do these 6, 7, 10 bilaterals, because that will be a touch disrespectful to the centrepiece of these 2 or 3 days. But with that gathering of heads of government and heads of state around, they will talk to one another. And there will be some set-piece bilaterals and an awful lot of mingling in the margins, and quite a lot of business might be done.
OK. For the moment, let's return. I think we're going to return to the procession. No, we're not. We're going to the queues, because that is the big story of the day, I think. Our Matthew Thompson is in southeast London, where people are beginning what could be a very long, hard wait. Matthew, I know you've been out there. Are you still at the back?
Look, anyone who thought that as the light went and as the colder air set in, the queue would start to dissipate, well, they would have been very wrong. You can just see behind me that the queue is as alive as ever. It's perhaps slightly shorter than it was an hour or so ago. I think at its maximum, the queue was pushing 3 miles plus long. It was way back at London Bridge. So it's shortened slightly. It's still at around St Paul's now, just by Blackfriars Bridge, but still 2.5 miles away from Westminster. So there's no sign of this queue slowing down anytime soon. But what would possess someone at this time of night to come and join a queue that might keep them here right through the evening? Well, I've got some people who are going to help us answer that question. What is it that possesses you to join the queue? What time is it? Nearly 10 o'clock?
Yeah. We've come to see you.
You come to see me?
Yeah.
Surely not.
We was watching Sky News and we thought we'll come and see you. You know.
So we've inspired you to come. Is that the deal?
That's right.
And the Queen presumably as well.
Well,
I think it was your last call when you said, you know, the queue is moving at a fast pace. I just got back from work. He just said to me, look, there's an opportunity that we might be able to get to see the Queen. You know, she's been our Queen.
It's history, so it's history in the making, so, you know, we thought, well...
Yeah, and this is your chance to be a part of it.
Be part of it. Yeah. She's been the longest reigning monarch, so...
How long would you... Have you got a sort of cut-off in mind? Like, if you were still here at 2 o'clock in the morning, would you go home, or are you prepared to sit it out right the way through?
Well, I've got to be up at 6, so...
Yeah. So he's a teacher, so he needs to go, and the kids will be waiting for him. We have got a cut-off in mind. If we don't get in, we'll go and have somewhere, we'll go out, get something to eat or drink, and make...
As you can see, it's moving quite quickly. So,
it is, yeah. I'm hoping to be done by about 12, half 12.
And well slept and ready to take on the kids.
1 o'clock
take
is
on
a
the kids in the morning.
Exactly. I've got 11 to 18-year-olds to teach tomorrow.
Well, good luck with that.
Thank you,
guys. Thank you ever so much.
Thank you.
So as you can see, the queue is moving quite quickly. It's been pretty much like that. We've been here throughout the day since about 2 o'clock this afternoon. The queue's been moving like this for nearly 5 hours now and shows absolutely no signs of slowing. So if you are intending on coming out late to maybe catch a shortened queue, you might be disappointed. But the one piece of advice I would give you is wrap up warm, plan some food and drinks, and also as lots of the restaurants and things close, you might want to think a little bit about where you're going to have your bathroom breaks as well.
There was Matthew Thompson with some great domestic advice for anybody who wants to come out to join that 2.5-mile queue. And Laura Bundock is with me once again. Matthew put it in his inimitable way. What would possess you to get out there?
I think when you speak to people and you've been hearing from them before they go in and before they come out, and the thing I find interesting is that this didn't happen before in previous lying-in states. We all have mobile phones. We all have televisions. There is news on everywhere. You can access these pictures wherever you are, basically. I think most people can at least switch on a TV and watch them. And yet, when you hear from people in the crowds, it's not enough. They want to be there. They want to do it in person. And I think that's what I find so interesting. The queues, no matter how long they are, I mean, lots of people have said, she served 70 years, we can do 24 hours in a queue. And I think in the rain, that especially hit home to many of us. But I think there is that absolute connection there, because she was a monarch who wanted to be out there, to be seen with people. I think in return, people are wanting to do the same to her, which is why I think you are seeing these really long queues with absolute steely determination, people joining them at goodness knows what time of night, with no idea when they might get to the front of the queue, because they want that moment. And it's a very, very brief moment as they enter Westminster Hall. Very, very few seconds is over. But those seconds mean everything. And that is their way, I think. You can see people lining up now, and they will be doing this all the way through the night. There is no break in this, right up until the early hours of Monday morning. It'll be a non-stop lying-in state. People want to be there. They want that moment to pause, to reflect, and in their own personal way to say thank you.
It's a very telling thing, this physical bond, isn't it? Because it's easy to forget that actually this late Queen was the monarch who reintroduced, I think is the right word, the walkabout, the physical proximity to people. You have to go back pretty much to medieval times to find kings and queens who would be out there with their people. You know, when Queen Elizabeth would actually walk through the streets. After that, very unusual. I mean, it is a very striking thing now that this direct relationship, at a time when we've got all the other media, the other channels and so on, this direct relationship has become important again.
Yeah, and when I was in Northern Ireland yesterday, everyone was filming, so you can barely see what's going on because there's so many people holding cameras up. They want to record that moment, and they also want to be there as well. And it is remarkable. And I'm still really struck watching the people filing past the coffin here, everyone having that small, brief moment. It is incredible, a real moment of history.
Laura, thank you very much. And now we'll return to the procession of the Queen's coffin from Buckingham Palace to Westminster Hall, where it now lies in state for 4 days. Dermot Murnaghan explains how the events unfolded.
The Queen's coffin was taken from its position inside Buckingham Palace and placed on a gun carriage at the grand entrance. It left in procession, followed by members of the royal family, led by the Queen's 4 children, including the King. To the sound of minute guns, the procession carried the Queen along the Mall for the last time, before turning right onto Horse Guards Parade. With Big Ben tolling every minute, the procession crossed the great ceremonial parade ground, site of trooping the colour on the Queen's official birthday each year. Then, turning onto Whitehall, it travelled past some of the great offices of government, Downing Street and the Cenotaph, which commemorates the nation's war dead. Entering Parliament Square, the procession turned into New Palace Yard, in front of the Houses of Parliament. And then into Westminster Hall, where the Queen's coffin is now lying in state for the days before her funeral. The procession made its way into the oldest part of the Palace of Westminster, led by heralds and then the most senior figures in Parliament, the Palace and the Church of England. The coffin, draped with the royal standard, was placed on a raised platform, the catafalque, in the middle of Westminster Hall. The King, Queen Consort and other members of the royal family behind. After a short service led by the Archbishop of Canterbury, the procession party left, and members of the Yeomen of the Guard and the Household Division took up positions around the coffin, forming a vigil that will guard the Queen as she lies in state until her funeral.
So, one more solemn and emotional day here in London, with the Queen now lying in state at the Palace of Westminster. The King, his siblings and his sons walked behind her coffin along the Mall, across Horse Guards Parade and down to Whitehall to deliver Her Majesty to the nation, ahead of Monday's state funeral.